You wake up, you can't move. Something is in the room. You feel it before you see it. Your chest is being crushed. You try to scream. Nothing. Then it's over. The experience was real. That part isn't the question. The question is what kind of real? The standard explanation goes something like this. During REM sleep, the phase where most vivid dreaming happens, your brainstem issues a signal that paralyzes your skeletal muscles. The mechanism exists for a good reason. It stops you from physically acting out your dreams. Occasionally, that paralysis lingers as you regain consciousness. You're awake enough to perceive your surroundings, but the motor inhibition hasn't lifted yet. The result is temporary immobility, sometimes lasting seconds, sometimes a few minutes. During this window, the dreaming brain is still partially online. It generates hallucinations. Classically, these fall into recognizable patterns: a shadowy intruder in the room, a crushing weight on the chest, a sense of floating outside the body. Research going back decades has cataloged these experiences across cultures. The old hag of Newfoundland, the kaneshibari of Japan, the jinn of Islamic tradition. The scientific consensus says we've decoded the mystery. It's a timing error between sleep stages. The hallucinations are the dreaming brain misfiring into waking perception. It's benign, it's understood, and in broad strokes, that explanation is correct. The neuroscience is solid. The phenomenology has been mapped. But there's a version of this story where calling it understood does something subtle and important. It closes a question that may not be fully closed. Here's where it gets interesting. Not because the neuroscience is wrong, but because of what the neuroscience is measuring and what it isn't. The hallucination taxonomy that became foundational to the modern understanding of sleep paralysis identified 3 clusters of experience: the intruder type, the incubus type, and what researchers called the vestibular motor type, sensations of floating, flying, or separating from the body. That third category gets the least attention, partly because it fits less neatly into the misfiring threat detection narrative that explains the first 2. But here's the thing about that taxonomy. It was built from self-report questionnaires. The categories reflect what people say they experienced, filtered through the language researchers gave them to describe it. That's not a fatal flaw. It's often how consciousness research has to work. But it means the map was drawn before the territory was fully explored. More specifically, the taxonomy was designed to categorize content, not to capture the quality of consciousness during the episode. People who've had sleep paralysis often report something the standard framing doesn't quite account for: a level of lucidity that feels different from ordinary dreaming and different from ordinary waking. Not a glitch, something more like a seam, a state that sits between 2 modes of mind, rather than being a corrupted version of either. Recent research on out-of-body experiences during sleep paralysis found that these episodes involve specific emotional signatures, not just fear, but sometimes calm, curiosity, even a sense of expanded awareness. That doesn't fit neatly into the threat detection misfiring model. It suggests the state has its own phenomenological structure, and when a state has a consistent internal structure, the interesting scientific question isn't just what caused it, it's what it reveals about the architecture of consciousness itself. Let's be specific about what the research actually shows and where the edges are. The neural mechanism is well established. During REM sleep, motor atonia is actively maintained by circuits involving the brainstem. Specific cell populations in regions like the ventromedial medulla and spinal interneurons work together to suppress muscle activity. Recent work has continued to map these pathways with increasing precision. When that atonia persists into waking, you get the paralysis component. That part is not controversial. What triggers the hallucinations is somewhat more complex. The prevailing model is that the dreaming brain, still partially active, generates threat-relevant content, hence the intruder, hence the weight on the chest. One interpretation draws on the idea that the brain's threat surveillance system doesn't go fully offline during REM, and during sleep paralysis, it may become hyperactivated precisely because the body can't move. You're vulnerable and you know it. That fear-vulnerability loop could explain the specific phenomenology of the intruder and incubus types. Studies examining the relationship between sleep quality and sleep paralysis have found that sleep deprivation, irregular schedules, and high stress are significant predictors. This tells us something important. The state isn't random. It's sensitive to the same variables that disrupt normal sleep architecture, which supports a systems-level explanation rather than a purely mechanical one. Now, the out-of-body dimension. Research published in 2023 found that out-of-body experiences during sleep paralysis are associated with distinct emotional profiles compared to other sleep paralysis episodes: lower fear, greater perceptual vividness, and a specific quality participants described as recognition, as though the state felt familiar or even expected. The researchers noted possible clinical implications, particularly around how patients interpret and integrate these experiences. What they couldn't fully explain, and were careful to acknowledge, is why the vestibular motor experiences have such a consistent, cross-cultural phenomenological signature. The floating sensation, the sense of an aerial perspective, the boundary between self and body becoming temporarily unclear. These aren't random. They recur with enough regularity across independent subjects that they suggest something about how the brain normally constructs the sense of being located inside a body, and what happens when that construction is temporarily destabilized. There's also a cultural to clinical pipeline worth examining. Research on alien abduction claimants found a notable overlap with people who reported sleep paralysis experiences, suggesting the same underlying state gets interpreted through radically different narrative frameworks depending on cultural context. That finding is important not because it dismisses the experience, it doesn't, but because it shows how the brain actively builds meaning around ambiguous perceptual states. The state itself is real, the interpretation is constructed. Distinguishing between those two things is harder than it sounds. A collage of cultural illustrations, a traditional woodblock print, a medieval manuscript figure, a modern clinical photograph, arranged in triptych. If you've had sleep paralysis, you've had a rare kind of window, not onto the supernatural, but onto something almost as strange, the normal machinery of your conscious mind running in an unusual configuration. Think about what the experience requires. Your perceptual systems are active, your sense of self is intact, you know it's you lying in the bed. Your emotional systems are fully online, sometimes overwhelmingly so, but your motor system is decoupled, and your sense of body boundary may be fluctuating. That combination doesn't happen during ordinary waking life. It barely happens during ordinary dreaming. What it might be revealing is that the self you experience as unified and continuous is actually assembled from components that can come apart. The sense of being located inside your body, what some researchers call embodied selfhood, turns out to be a product the brain generates rather than a given. Sleep paralysis briefly shows you the generating process. That doesn't make the fear less real. It doesn't make the crushing sensation on your chest less vivid, but it does suggest that what you're experiencing isn't a malfunction of consciousness. It may be an unusually direct encounter with its normal workings. Here's the tension I can't quite resolve. The neuroscience gives us a coherent account of the mechanism. But mechanism and meaning aren't the same thing. We can trace the neural correlates of the hallucinations without fully explaining why that specific state, awake but paralyzed, perceiving but not acting, produces experiences that people across wildly different cultures describe with such remarkable consistency. There's a version of the "it's just a glitch" framing that feels prematurely satisfied. Not wrong exactly, but like an answer that was given before the question was finished. The honest position might be this: we understand enough about sleep paralysis to stop being frightened of it. We don't yet understand enough to stop being curious about it. The research behind this video draws from Nature and Science of Sleep, Transcultural Psychiatry, Consciousness and Cognition, Journal of Sleep Research, Physiological Reviews, Current Neurology and Neuroscience Reports, Journal of Integrative Neuroscience. Every claim traces to a published source. Full citations are in the description below. If the way this channel thinks about neuroscience resonates with you, subscribing helps this work reach people who'd appreciate it. New videos on the science of mind every week.